But first, putting aside the pageantry of the inauguration today, it's clear that President Donald Trump is wasting no time in pursuing his second-term agenda. In front of the media, behind the historic Resolute desk in the Oval Office, America's 47th president signed off on a flurry of executive orders, putting his mark on the new administration and very clearly distancing it from its predecessor. Joining me now, someone who's no stranger to the Oval Office, or the man sitting behind the desk tonight, is Donald Trump's former White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, welcome to the program. Look, I've shown my viewers those images out of the Oval Office today, the president behind the desk on day one, signing hundreds of executive orders. We'll get to the detail of what's in those orders in a moment, but the unfettered access of the media to him, the open questions exchange, it's such a departure from the hyper management of the Biden era, isn't it?
Well, it is a dramatic change. It's more like what Trump did in the first term. He had almost unlimited access, or the media had almost unlimited access to him from 2017 to 2021. Even the media here, Peter, started to complain towards the very end about Joe Biden's inaccessibility. Now, listen, there's one thing the press is going to have plenty of for the next 4 years, and that's the chance to talk directly to the President of the United States. We stopped a tradition when I was in the Trump White House. Typically, the press secretary would have a daily briefing. We stopped that because the president himself was talking to the press almost every single day. I absolutely expect that to continue.
All right, let's talk about those executive orders. The border crisis, it was a priority. We knew that. So too energy, but also changes to US funding of the World Health Organization and declarations about gender. Now, he's very deliberate here. So how do you think Trump 2.0 will be different this time?
Well, what I tell people is that what they liked about Trump 1.0, they will like even more. And what they disliked about Trump 1.0, they will dislike even more just because he's better at the job. Keep in mind, when he won in 2016, it came not only as a surprise to a lot of people, it came as a surprise to him and his team, which means they hadn't done a lot of the work necessary to get ready to go into office. That's not the case now. They've hit the ground running today. He did 225 executive orders in the first 4 years. He may do as many as 200 this week alone. So no, it doesn't surprise me that it's Trump in high gear. By the way, it also doesn't surprise me. You mentioned the World Health Organization. That has been an issue for conservatives in this country going back to the beginning of the COVID pandemic, when the World Health Organization, which we fund to a substantial degree, would not allow American observers and scientists into China for several weeks. In fact, it may be several months. And that sort of gave rise to this, the question amongst Republicans, conservatives here, as to why are we paying an organization that doesn't allow us to actually do work with it? So it doesn't surprise me that was one of the, it surprised me as one of the first things, but it doesn't surprise me that it was on the list of initiatives that he wanted to put into place fairly early.
I reckon plenty of Australians were cheering that one as well. Energy, it's a massive issue here domestically. Now, we're all watching this very closely, particularly his decision to leave a number of global climate agreements and really fast-track US energy self-reliance. How's this going to shake up things at home and abroad?
Well, fairly dramatically. Keep in mind, it's what he's counting on. He's made a lot of promises, Peter, regarding inflation. Inflation is driven in large part in this country by government spending, and it's unlikely that that is going to change. So if Donald Trump is going to do something about inflation, he has to go to someplace else other than spending. And the two places he's looking at are regulation, deregulating, making it easier to get goods and services to market. That tends to reduce inflation, and then energy. Which we have a lot of in this country, as you do in your country, of a different sort. But we will be focusing on domestic energy production as part of Trump's efforts to keep energy costs down, because energy costs are a lot more than just the gasoline you put in your automobile. It's also the cost of a lot of chemical products, fertilizers that go into food, transportation costs, et cetera. So if he can get energy prices down, he might be able to do something about inflation, and he needs to follow through on that promise fairly quickly.
You've worked in the White House. I know my viewers want to know what's really going on behind the scenes. What's the mechanics of this transition of power? And given your window into how things operated previously with Vice President Pence. JD Vance is a very different character. So what sort of role do you see him playing, Mick?
How J.D. Vance fits into this administration will be one of the fascinating things to watch. Keep in mind, a lot of the people around Trump have been with him now for 8 years. J.D. Vance has been with him for 6 or 7 months. So I'll be curious to see how he integrates into into the team, whether or not he finds his issues, finds his footing, finds a place inside the Oval Office and becomes a trusted advisor to the president. He might not. That will be one of the things that political observers here in this country for sure will be watching closely.
All right, talk to me about the Congress, because part of the reason the president has signed all these executive orders is that Biden overturned his old orders. So how much of what he's put in place today will be backed up with legislation? How cooperative will his own party be in the Congress?
It's an excellent question. Look, executive orders, to your point, aren't law. They're essentially directives to our executive branch as to how they are to function, how are they prioritize their time, their energy, and their money. And in order to be truly lasting, they have to be turned into legislation that comes out of the Congress. That is going to be really, really hard to do, Peter. There's a very narrow majority of Republicans in the House. And even though there's a substantial majority of Republicans in the Senate, we have 53 out of the 100 seats. Most legislation, not all, but most legislation in our Senate requires 60 votes. So it's not like the Republicans can push through everything in both the House and the Senate easily. If they're going to pass significant legislation out of the Senate, in most cases, that will take at least 7 Democrats. And it's unlikely that many of these Trump executive orders will be turned into legislation by Democrats in the Senate.
President Biden pardoning the rest of his family members minutes before he walked out the door. President Trump pardoning the January 6 protesters the moment he walks in. I have to be honest, the whole concept of a leader being able to pardon individuals sits pretty uncomfortably with me. Are we likely to see this new weaponisation of the legal system become a permanent feature of US politics?
Yeah, I think we probably are. I think that the toothpaste is out of the tube, as we say in this country. It's very difficult to put it back in. Keep in mind that Joe Biden had said for years that broad and sweeping pardons were wrong, that they implied criminality, and that he would never do them. Of course, he went back on all of those declarations and so forth. I fully expect Donald Trump to take it to the next level, pardoning not only his family on the way out the door, but probably many, many members of his administration. Even if they've done nothing that anybody ever thinks is wrong, it's sort of a really good insurance policy against a weaponized government coming back to get you. But yes, I do think there'll be a discussion in this country now about whether or not we need to limit that authority. And it's not only going to get worse before it gets better. So my guess is there will be a debate on this, both academically and politically and legislatively in this country.
Well, how about it, Mick? Does today make you want to get back in the saddle?
Oh, no. Listen, I had a great time. I wouldn't change it for the world, but I've found that being near politics is a lot better than in politics. For example, I'm going to go to bed shortly after this interview. My guess is the team in the White House has probably got 6 or 7 hours ahead of them this evening. Keep in mind, Donald Trump only sleeps about 4 hours a night. And he never sleeps right after a rally. He's a true extrovert, Peter. He draws energy from these public appearances. So he will be wound up and ready to go tonight, and he will expect his team to be there with him. I've put in my time on that duty, and I'm glad to step back and let others enjoy the privilege.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Peter.